Hello and welcome back to the Potting Shed. I'm Chris Lambert, gardener and lecturer in horticulture here at BCA. Today I'm showing you how to cultivate a border, answering your questions on magnolia pruning and making a friend of nettles. I've been asked, when is the best time to prune a magnolia tree that is fully in bud? I'm going to assume that you have the more common deciduous type like this rather than an evergreen. Now, magnolias are beautiful plants when they come into full bloom and are one of the oldest groups dating back at least 20 million years. Magnolias generally flower from late March to late May and are always best pruned after flowering. They flower on last year's wood, so pruning in May allows for new growth and bud formation for the following year. If you prune now, you would reduce its flowering and potentially open it up to infection. And if you prune too late, you would not allow for enough growth for flowering for the next year. Magnolias are like Goldilocks. They need the pruning to be just right to be happy. In most cases, you should prune in accordance with the 3 Ds, focusing on growth that is dead, diseased and damaged. And even then it should only be light pruning to avoid the plant producing lots of young shoots which ruin the shape of this shrub. We always say that little and often is best for most plants to avoid shock. But if you need to go in hard due to a few years of uncertainty-led neglect, then try to spread this out over a couple of years and focus on reducing that height at first before removing crossing over branches. You want to keep the centre of the plant nice and open and have a good overall shape. And all cuts should be clean and close to a growth point. Now, good luck. Remember that you're dealing with a resilient living thing. And if you snip off something that you didn't mean to, it will generally recover. They can sting if not handled properly, but nettles, Urtica diaca, are definitely worth the effort to get to know better. Urtica comes from the Latin word to burn, and diaca links to the fact that the plant is dioecious, meaning that some plants will be male and some female. Now, all children quickly learn to identify this common weed, which can be found almost everywhere humans go, as it loves fertile and disturbed soil. Now, interestingly, if you grasp a nettle firmly, it has a tendency not to sting, whereas a mere brush from it can actually cause multiple attacks, though best to take my word for this. Nettle stings are like tiny hypodermic needles that, when triggered, inject the poor subject with a crazy mix of formic acid, which is also in bee stings, serotonin and histamine, which causes an itchy burning rash for many hours. The Romans, it's said, allegedly flogged themselves with nettles to help keep themselves warm in our chilly northern climate, but I'm a bit dubious about that. Now, many people believe that dock leaves will work to alleviate the sting of nettles, though no scientific evidence has yet been found to support this, and the soothing result may be just down to the placebo effect. It's typical, I can never find any anywhere near our nettles here. On a culinary note, nettles are very tasty and have a flavour similar to spinach. They're best harvested when young in the spring and go amazingly well with wild garlic in a creamy soup. They need to be boiled to destroy the acid in their sting, and afterwards they can be used to wrap cheese, made into pesto, and they can even be used to make beer. If you really like the taste of them, you can then go and join the World Nettle Eating Competition in a pub in Dorset. Practically, nettles have seen many uses over the centuries. Their fibres have been used in clothing for over 3,000 years, and they've also given us dye with which to colour our clothes, yellow from the roots and a rich dark green from the leaves. They've also been used in medication for a range of ailments, including arthritis. As to be expected, nettles are great for wildlife, with a number of our wonderful butterflies, such as our tortoiseshell and peacock, using it as a food source for their caterpillars. During the winter, the nettle's hollow stems provide an excellent shelter for a number of different insect species to overwinter in, and the prolific seeds the plant produces are also great for birds. Now, nettles can be a bit of a bugger once in your garden, as the plant spreads quickly via the bright yellow roots and underground stems called rhizomes. If you want to plant a patch in your wildlife plot, then it would be best to plant it in the ground in a pot to stop its roots from spreading too much. So you may have to follow a bit of social distancing with this plant, but it certainly does deserve a place in our garden spaces. At this time of year, you're going to be desperate to get outside. One of the first jobs everyone thinks about is digging over their borders. Now, if you've got a situation like this, where I've got no plants in here and I'm getting ready for the new season, then giving it a good proper dig over is a really useful thing to do. On the other hand, if you've got a border already with a load of plants in, then maybe you want to adopt the no-dig method, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Digging is an essential activity, and it's one we train all of our students here at BCA about. It's a very simple thing, but it has a complex reason about why we do it. The first thing is, when we've got soil like this, we're going to be weeding it, so we're going to be turning that soil. Turning the soil is essential. The nutrients will slowly filter down into that soil, and by inverting it with our spade, we're bringing it back to the surface to enable the plant's roots that when I kind of put them in here afterwards, they're going to be able to access all those nutrients. The action of digging over the ground is also going to help to add air to the soil, and air is essential for root development. Add to the fact that by adding air, I also therefore am increasing drainage and allowing any water that does fall to fall and go through that soil. So when we dig, what we're always looking to do is get down as deep as we can, and normally we describe that as being a spit's depth. And a spit's depth is literally about a foot or 30 centimetres, which is the normal width or depth of your spade. When you dig, it's always important to make sure you're using your legs, not your back. Insert your spade nice and firmly in there, lean it back and literally turn it over. This gives us a really good chance to ensure that we can look for any kind of roots of any perennial weeds, things like bindweed that will come back. Annual weeds, things which only last a short season, will generally be kind of damaged by this process, so we don't need to worry about it. So remove any weeds that you find and carefully get rid of those, and work in a systematic way across your area, front to back, without stepping on what you've just done. And that way your entire area will be kind of all turned over, the nutrients be at the top, and it's then that I can reach for my trusty garden fork to then break that up. Now that I've turned the soil over, I've added air, but now I need to break it up further to make sure that when water does land on this soil, it can percolate through, and that's what we describe as drainage. So again, in a systematic manner, we take our garden fork and we carefully break up the soil, making sure that we take out any weeds that we see, because they'll just keep coming back. You will have to be aware that when you turn your soil, weed seeds lower down in that soil will come to the surface and germinate. So you will get an early flush of weeds in springtime. So don't worry about that, that's normal and you haven't done anything wrong. But it is important that we kind of turn it, and it's important that we break it up. You want to get it to a point where most of those larger lumps have been broken down by the action of digging and forking. And what you'll find is your fork will go in there beautifully easily without very much effort at all. But you now have a lot of air in it. So what we do is we have to kind of take some of that air out. There's too much. So we do what's known as the horticultural shuffle. So we carefully go over the ground, compacting it ever so slightly until we've taken that air out of that. We then reach for our garden rake and we finally rake it over, bringing that level nice with our surroundings, bringing it gently backwards and forwards, using the rake to break up any material. We don't want to remove anything, this is all valuable. And you can see by gently supporting the top of that rake, I get to a particular point where we have this fine, crumbly, what we know as the trade as a biscuit tilth. And it's perfect for sowing seeds or planting plants. And with proper prep like this, you'll always find your life so much easier for planting, for sowing, because you've got the perfect surface and the perfect substructure to do anything that you need to afterwards. The no-dig method is increasingly gaining in popularity, and it is, as it says, it's a process by which we don't need to do any kind of extra digging. In an established border like this, we can allow nature to add its bounty back to the soil with only a limited input from ourselves. The no-dig approach is always best suited to an established border like this. What we do is we're always going to have to do some weeding, but we only take out those weeds that we need and avoid too much disturbance to the soil. If you think about it, every time we dig, we break up that already established structure, we kind of disturb the roots, and we also bring weed seeds to the surface. It is key that we limit that down, and that saves us time, energy, and it gives us a much better and more ecological approach to gardening. Nature always wants to do it for us, and the best way to do it in a no-dig method is by regularly topping up our border with, here we've used bark chip, but you can use well-composted manure or compost. And what happens is all of the soil invertebrates, insects, bacteria that teem in their millions break it down over time to this dark and rich material. As that happens, those nutrients are added back to the soil and the organic matter is replenished. Each and every year, these plants remove material, nutrients from the soil. And it's important that every time we take, we must always allow nature to give something back. Thanks for joining us in the potting shed. If you have any questions, drop me a line at chrislambertgardening@gmail.com. And remember to send us your images using the hashtag #thepottingshed. And don't forget, you can still watch Series 1 on the Reading Fringe Festival website at readingfringefestival.co.uk.